Baruch Hashem, we are about to complete another Masechta. This is pretty amazing. If you count up the number of Masechtas that Baruch Hashem, our Daf Yomi got to do, that is very, very cool. So today, we're just going to finish Masechtas Taanis. Tomorrow we start Masechtas Megillah. Okay? Today, by the way, is my last day of saying Kaddish for my mother. So today's learning is Lezecha Nishmas Leah Bas Tzvi. May she be a Melitz Yosha on all of us, and the Neshama should have an Aliyah go as high to the Kisei HaKavod as possible. Okay, we are on 30b2. 30b2. The last paragraph on 30b2. Omer Rabba Bar Chana Omer Rab Yochanan Yom Shekula Boy Meisei Midbar. Oh, I think we did this yesterday, but all right, we'll continue it anyway. What's the difference? Yom Shekula Boy Meisei Midbar. Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av, was the day on which those who were designed to die in the Midbar finished dying. The Maraglim, the spies, that whole generation, over a 39-year period, passed away in the wilderness. That 40th year, it stopped. How do we know? The Amamar Ad Shaloi Kula Meisei Midbar. As long as all of those who are destined to pass away in the wilderness had not finished dying, the divine did not communicate with Moshe. It doesn't mean that they didn't that Hashem did not communicate with Moshe for the middle 38 years. Of course he did. But as we know, Moshe Rabbeinu and Moshe Rabbeinu alone, Moses our teacher, was the only one to ever speak with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ponim el ponim, face to face, like a father to a son, like an Adaim, like a master to his servant. But during these 38 years, after the Meragim, until the generation passed away, Hashem spoke to him more from a distance. In other words, Hashem spoke to him with the words Vayomer, and he said, as opposed to Vayedaber, and he spoke. Speaking to somebody is a much more emotional, close-knit conversation, as opposed to Vayomer, when you say something to somebody else. So that's what it means over here. We're on 30b3. Shenebar, like it says, in Parshas Devarim, when Moshe Rabbeinu repeated the story of the spies of the Meraglim to the next generation. So he said, Vayika shetamu kol anshe ha-milchama, when it was that all the men of the war ceased dying, Vayedaber Hashem Elai. Excuse me. Apologize. And then it goes and says, for the first time in that whole parsha, the whole parsha of Devarim, instead of saying Vayomer Hashem Elai, and Hashem said to me, it then switched after everybody passed away. Vayomer Vayedaber Hashem Elai Leba. So, one more minute. Now, what makes it very interesting, it turns out, therefore, that Ein Vayedaber, and he spoke to him, is a Lashon Chiba, a Lashon of love, of speaking face to face, intimately. The problem is that we all learned, we have another lima that says, Ein Vayedaber ela Lashon Kasha. The word Vayedaber, and he spoke to him, is only strong language. So how do you reconcile that Ein Vayedaber ela Lashon Kasha, the word Vayedaber, and he spoke to him, is strong language, to the idea of over here that Vayedaber Hashem Elai Lema, that Hashem spoke to me saying is a Lashon of love. But if you think about it, you understand it. If Reuven comes to shul with his kids, and Shimon comes to shul with his kids, and Reuven's kids are talking in shul, and Shimon's kids are talking in shul, logically, Ruvain should tell Shimon's kids to be quiet. Why? He loves his kids. He doesn't want to tell his kids off. He doesn't really care about Shimon's kids, so he should tell Shimon's kids off. But the reality is that, of course, that does not happen. When your kids are talking in shul and somebody else's kids are talking in shul, who do you tell to be quiet? You tell your own kids to be quiet. And the reason for that is because you don't really care about the other guy's kids. So that's not the point. Your kids you love. So you want them to be their best. So the kids that you love are the ones that you rebuke. You don't rebuke those that you have no connection to. You only rebuke those that you have a connection to, that you have an emotional connection to. So Ein Vayedaber Lashon Chiba, Ein Vayedaber is nothing more than a lashon of love, a language of love, because Ein Vayedaber Lashon Kasha, because the word Vayedaber is speaking to is a lashon of strength. Because you only speak language of strength, of teichacha, of rebuke, only to those that you love. Those you could care less about, right? You don't go ahead and you don't bother. You don't take the effort. That's what the pshat here is. Another explanation of the Tu B'Av. Ula Ama Yom Shabital Hoshea Ben Ela Piroistios. It's the day that the king Hoshea removed the sentries, the guards, that Yerovim ben Avat back in the day had put on the roads leading to Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim L'Regel, to prevent, Yerovim did this in order to prevent the Jews from going to the Beis Hamikdash, the Holy Temple, on the Shalosh Regalim, on the pilgrimage for Yom Tovim. And he did this because the nation had split into two, and that would be the 10 tribes, Machni Yisrael, Malchus Yisrael, and Malchus Yehuda, which was in the south, and Yerushalayim, the Beis Hamikdash, was in the other kingdom, in the Malchus Yehuda kingdom, in the kingdom of Judah, as opposed to the kingdom of Israel. So he didn't want them to go back into the kingdom of Yehuda. So he put up idols, and he stopped them from doing the pilgrimages to the Beis Hamikdash. V'Omar, and King Hoshea said at that time, and now we're on today's daf, Lamed Aleph, Amid Aleph, 31A1, Yalu. Whoever wants to go up and worship, whatever they desire, they should do it. Now it happens to be that King Hoshea was a Rasha, but he wasn't as bad a Rasha. He wasn't as bad a Rasha as his predecessors. Ramasna explains about what happened on the 15th of Av. Yom Shenitnu Haruge Beitar LeKavura. That was the day that the slain Jews of Beitar were afforded to have burial. In the revolt of Bar Kosiva, which took place approximately 50 years after the destruction of this Beis Hamikdash, of the second Beis Hamikdash, I believe was about 50 years. And Beitar was a city that sided with Bar Kokhba, but at the end of the time, Bar Kokhba was killed or committed suicide. And the city of Beitar was wiped out to the point that the blood of the Jews that were killed out in Beitar, close to 2 million people, the blood flowed out of the city for 2 years. Worse than that, the Romans refused the other Jews to allow them to go into Beitar to bury their dead. So the dead were strewn about the city. Millions were strewn about the city of Beitar for years. Miraculously, the bodies did not decompose. And on this Tu B'Av, eventually, the Romans relented and allowed the Jews to go and bury the bodies, the people of Beitar. On that day, that they allowed the Jews of Beitar to be buried. The sages in Yavna instituted the fourth blessing in Birchas Hamazon in benching. The first bracha of Hazones Oilam came from Moshe. The second bracha of Noida Lecha V'Yala Kol came, I believe, from Yeshua. The third bracha came from Rachem Noah Uvenei Yerushalayim, came from David HaMelech or Shlomo HaMelech, and I'm not sure. And the fourth bracha, Hatoy V'Ametiv, look at after Uvenei Yerushalayim, right, came from this over here after the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash, and when they were allowed to bury the dead of Yavna. Tiknu b'Yavna hatoy v'ametiv, who is good and confers good. Hatoy shelo yisrichu, who is good because miraculously the bodies did not decay. The hametiv, and who confers good, shenitu lekavura, that ultimately the bodies were allowed to be buried. Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef say, the 15th of Av has this reason, Yoim Shapastu Milichros Eitzim Lamarocha. Because on the 15th of Av, that was when they stopped cutting trees for the wood, for the Mizbeach, for the altars. The Tanya, because we learned in the Baraisa. Rabbi Eliezer Godel Rabbi Eliezer Godel said, B'chamisha Asa Ba'al Be'elech Toshes Koichish Shel Chamo. The 15th of Av and onwards, the sun's strength wanes. In other words, that is the height of the sun in the summertime, and from that point on, it begins to move into the wintertime. The Loyhaya Karsin Eitz in the Maracha. From that point on, they did not cut trees down for the Maracha, for the pyre on the altar. The fish ain't on elevation because the wood would not be sufficiently enough dry. Okay, because the inside obviously would still be a little wet because the sun's power to dry it up is not as strong. Other Ramanashia, the Karvula, and they would call this day Tu B'Av Yom Tibar Mago, the day of the axes breaking. In other words, the day that we stop chopping down trees. Mikal Ve'elach, from the 15th of Av and onwards, the Moisif Yosef, one who adds extra hours of learning at night to his daytime learning will add days and lengths to his life. Udaloi Moisif, one who does not add at night to his Torah learning, Yosef, who should be gathered. Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yosef, Tigrei Ime, his mother will bury him. But the point being is that one learns X amount of hours during the day. But when the day gets shorter, theoretically, the amount of hours that he's learning is less. So he's saying, make up those hours that you used to learn in the summertime, make it up at night in the wintertime. Shebehen boin b'nois Yerushalayim, and we said on these days, on the 15th of Av, the maidens of Yerushalayim would go out into the vineyards and they would say all their things. And what we said over there, a very beautiful thing, we said they all went out in white, in borrowed clothing. How did it work? The borrowed clothing, and that was just to make sure Misha and Lloyd, not to embarrass somebody who didn't have a dress, so everybody had to borrow from everybody else. Tanu Rabbana, Bas Melech Shoyeles mi Bas Kohen Gadol. The king's daughter would borrow a white garment from the Kohen Gadol's daughter, who was a slightly lower rank. Bas Kohen Gadol mi Bas Sagat. The daughter of the Kohen Gadol would borrow the white dress from the daughter of the Sagat, the deputy Kohen Gadol's daughter. Ubas Sagat mi Bas Mashiach Melchama. And the deputy Kohen Gadol's daughter would borrow from the daughter of the Kohen anointed for battle. Slightly lower, the general. Ubas Mashiach Melchama Ubas Kohen Edit, and the daughter of the Kohen appointed for battle would borrow the white dress from the daughter of an ordinary Kohen. From that point on, all the other Jews would borrow one from another. The regular kohen would borrow from other Jews, and they would borrow from each other. And they did it in order so that a poor girl who did not have a nice dress would not be embarrassed. And we said, because they were borrowing one to the other, and we're not sure which girl was menstruating, etc. So maybe the clothing were tamei, were contaminated. So we said, kol hakelim tuhunin tefillah. All the garments needed immersion. Amar Rabbi Elazar, afilu mekufolin uminochem bekufsa. Even a garment, even a dress that was folded and lying in a chest and was unquestionably tar, still had to go into the mikveh, had to be immersed in the mikveh. Why? Again, for the same reason, because you don't embarrass anyone. Oh, this dress was good, but that girl must have her period. We don't talk that way. We don't deal that way. Everything went into the mikveh. The maidens of Klal Yisrael went out and danced in the vineyards. In the Mishnah, it happened to have said B'nais Yerushalayim, but here we're saying all the girls did it, all over Eretz Yisrael. B'nais Yisrael Yotzim V'Chaylos B'Keramim. Tana, we learned Mi She'ein Lo Isha Nipsa L'Sham. Whoever did not have a wife would turn up there to find one. That was the place of Shidduchim. The distinguished ones among them would say, young man, look at this. Tana Rabbana. Your piece of Shebehem Mahoyo. Irem 31A2. 31A2. Tana Rabbana. Yopa Shebehem Mahoyo. Irem. The beautiful girls, what did they say? They would say, Tanu Enechem L'Yoifi, pay attention to beauty. Sheina Yisha Ela L'Yoifi, for a wife is there for her beauty. Miyochis Shebehem, those who came from good families. Ma'uayres, what did they say? Tanu Enechem L'Mishpacha, pay attention to family. Sheina Yisha Ela L'Bana, because a wife is primarily for childbearing. And a good girl that comes from a good family will be a good mother and wife. And the homely ones, the ones who were not so pretty and did not come from such good families, what did they say? Acquire your purchase for the sake of heaven. In other words, false is the chain, and nothing is the beauty. Isha Yiras Hashem Itasawo. A woman who's God-fearing is desired, right? But they also added, but only on the condition that after you marry us, you will adorn us with gold jewelry and beautiful clothing. Because the clothing make the man. Because as we know, with a little makeup and some good clothing and all that, everybody could look good. And so, even the girls said it. Marry us l'shem Shemayim, because we're the year of Shemayim, but it doesn't mean that you should then ignore us. Now the Gemara concludes, since we're talking about marriage relationships over here, it concludes with the relationship between Hashem and the tzaddikim of Klal Yisrael. Amar Ula Bara, Amar Rabbi Elazar. Ula Bara said in the name of Rabbi Elazar, in the future, the Holy One, blessed be His name, will make a circle, mochal, a circle for the righteous. Now, the word mochal, mem ches vav lamed, could also be pronounced moichal, forgive. So Zog the Yavitz, that la'asid lovei HaKadosh Baruch Hu will come and He will forgive all of Klal Yisrael. And so therefore, all of Klal Yisrael will come and sit in a circle. And He will sit among them, as it were, in the middle of the circle in Gan Eden, in the Garden of Eden. And each person in the circle will take their finger and point towards Hashem. Shenema, and they will say, because as it says, "Va'omar b'yoymahu," and he shall say on that day, "Hine Elokeinu zeh," this is our God. Kivinu lo v'oishienu. We hope to Him, and He saved us. Zeh Hashem, this is Hashem. Kivinu lo, to whom we hope. Yagila v'nisbacha b'shuasai. Let us exalt and be glad in His salvation. Amidst Hashem b'meheir b'yameinu, may Mashiach come in our days. Hadan Allah b'shloisha parokim b'sukala mesechtes Taanis. Hadan Allah b'shloisha parokim b'sukala mesechtes Taanis. Hadan Allah b'shloisha parokim b'sukala mesechtes Taanis. We shall return to you b'shloisha parokim, and the tractate Taanis is concluded. We shall return to you. The b'shloisha parokim and the tractate Taanis is concluded. We shall return to you. B'shloisha parokim and the tractate Taanis is concluded. And now we do the Hadron on the next page. Hadron Allah Mesechtes Taanis without the Halon, Datan Allah Mesechtes Taanis without the Halon. And it starts with Mesechtes Taanis, but it starts with we repeat this paragraph 3 times. Hadron Allah Mesechtes Taanis without the Halon, Datan Allah Mesechtes Taanis without the Halon. Lord, it starts with Mesechtes Taanis, Lord, it starts with Noble, Lord, 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 Hadron Allah Mesechtes Taanis without the Halon. Datan Allah Mesechtes Taanis without the Chalom, and the Stanch Minach Mesechtes Taanis will the Stanch Minon. The reason why we do it 3 times, because like we say in davening, Lo yamushu min picha, mi pi zarecha, u mi zera zarecha. It shall never leave our mouths, the mouths of our children, and the mouths of our grandchildren. Because we say, Chut ha-mishula shloi mishala. The 3-bound string, the 3-corded string will never rip. And that's what we're saying. The Torah will not be forgotten from a family when they have at least 3 generations that have learned Torah. He wrote some from that one. Chani ba papa, Rami ba papa, Nachman ba papa, Achyoi ba papa, Abba Mori ba papa, Rafra ba papa, Rachish ba papa, Surcha ba papa, Adam ba papa, Doru ba papa. Hereb no adi no eleheinu es nebe soy sech befinu befinu tzam chabesi so b'niyah. Kulo nu anachtu v'tzeitzayenu v'tzeitzayenu v'tzeitzay am chabesi Yisrael. Kulo nu yoydi shemecha b'loim v'soy sech l'shma. May oy vaytichak meinu v'tzeitzay ki di oylem hili v'samay b'chudecha l'man lo yeboish. The olam lo yeshkach b'chudecha kivam chi yisoni baruch ato adinoi labdeni chukecha omein 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 selaboed. Moidim anachnu lefanechu adinoi eleheinu v'lehei aviseinu shesabtecho kenim yoshev esmedus v'loi sabtecho kenim yoshev koronos shanu mashkimim v'hei mashkimim onu mashkimim l'dibei Torah v'hei mashkimim l'dorah b'teilim onu amelim v'hei amelim onu amelim v'kabim socha v'hei amelim v'einam v'kabim socha onu rotzim v'hei rotzim onu rotzim l'chayin l'bo v'hei rotzim l'vei shachas v'shenema v'yatem l'him t'adidem l'vei shachas anshei domim v'mirma l'yekse yemei v'ani eftach poch. He wrote from there, Chadinoi Lahai Kishem Shazatani Lisai Mesechtes Taanis Kain Tazei Lahaschul Mesechtes Usvarim Akedim Lisaimom Lulul Moidu Lalamed Lishma Balase Sulakayim as called the Brain Samaton Zech Biabo B'Schutz Kalatanoi Mamaroim V'Salmides Chachamim Yamo Li Lizarich Lo Yasomu Shatorim Mipi Zari Zari Ad Oilom Niskayim Bibis Lechacho Tadcha Oitzcha B'Shachbachcho Tishmor Alecha Vakitzoisihi si checha kivi yirbu yemecha v'yisifu lechosh noischaim oirech yomri b'mimino b'smoil oisha b'chavayit adinoi oiz liyamo yitein adoino yevorech esamai b'sholoi. Mazel tov, mazel tov, mazel tov. I just want to point out the Taanis right before Asara B'Teves. And I was lucky enough on the day of my mother's last day of Kaddish, we finished this Masechta. We will finish Masechtas Megillah on her yard site. Amazing. And so we were able to make a siyum even on her yard site.